Good morning, everyone. This hangout is probably, well, I'm not going to even say probably, it pretty much most certainly is going to tick off a whole lot of people. But my concern is telling the truth, not about people's feelings. Um, just looking at societies that have been involved in mass murders, like societies like Pol Pot, under Pol Pot's rule, societies under Hitler's rule, societies under Stalin's rule. Um, These are societies that were involved in mass murder, mass genocide, and typically mass murder is defined as the indiscriminate killing of a huge number of people, specifically by the government agency itself. But in this particular context of abortion, I say that mass murder is the indiscriminate killing of people, of a huge number of people, done by the citizens themselves and collectively. I can't even remember the exact excuse me, I can't remember the exact number up to 2017, but it was something along. It's in the millions. It's in the ridiculously high millions of abortions that have been legally performed since the legalization in Roe v. Wade in 1973. Um, Abortion literally, quite literally, is mass murder by the citizens themselves. So you got the government agencies who have been involved in mass murder, and the citizens themselves collectively, which have been involved in mass murder. And please understand, I'm not simply talking about the women that go into abortion clinics. I'm talking about the men that facilitate them as well. The practitioners who may be men or women who perform them themselves, and the men who facilitate these women going into these clinics. So it's not just women I'm calling out as murderers here. I'm calling out the men as murderers too, by proxy, by association, especially when they talk it over with their girlfriends to have them walk into a clinic to get an abortion. So um, it's literally mass murder by the citizen populace. Just uh, an ungodly number of children have been killed since 1973, and we're just talking about the United States alone. We're not even talking about other countries that has it legal, like England and countries like these. Um, I think at some point, unfortunately and tragically, even Ireland is going to join that horrible, horrible stained history of the mass murder of their children, with the drastic change in their abortion laws as of the past month or two. So um, a lot of people don't want to call abortion what it is. They don't want to say that it's murder. They don't want to call the women who participated murderers or anything like that. But if we're going to be honest, if we're going to have an honest conversation about what is going on, you wouldn't sit up here and say that a person who steals something is not a thief. You wouldn't sit up here and say a person um, who dominates someone's personal body, who dominates someone's bodily autonomy without their consent. You wouldn't say that they aren't rapists. And you certainly wouldn't say it because it's legal. Like under Sharia law, um, women are forced to be raped, but uh, they just frame it under the law as women have to give themselves over to their husbands. So basically, if women give themselves over to their husbands, then um, it's not rape. But let's just be real. They just do this because the law forced them to do so, not because they want to give themselves over to their husbands. Just whenever their husband desires them, they have to give themselves over to them. That's under Sharia law. But just because and the law doesn't mean that what these men doing aren't rape. Okay, so you can try to contextualize as, oh, well, it's legal, therefore you can't say they're murderers or you can't say they're rapists. That's baloney. Okay, the reason why you even have the term mass murder is because, like, when you look at societies like Hitler's Holocaust, where he just ordered the countless slaughtering of the Jews, it was illegal to do it under his regime, but yet you still got the term mass murder placed for it. So it has nothing to do with whether it's legal or not. It's about the fact that you are brutally slaughtering uh, huge numbers of people. I mean, it doesn't even matter if it's one or if it's 1 million. You still, it's still murder. Period. Murder don't just exist in one context. Clearly, it's not just the legal context that exists. I mean, yeah, that's the legal term, but um, you got the term mass murder, which also applies it to even countries who legally kill their citizens. And you got there are definitions which say that murder is to slaughter uh, bar- barbarously. I think that's how you say that. Barbaric, barbarously. I don't know how that's pronounced, but uh, the point is what we're talking about with this abortion stuff. It's not just murder, but it's mass murder. And any of the people who participated in it, whether it's the women who walk into the clinics, whether it's the boyfriend who facilitates them and enable them to do this, all of them are murderers. And given the ungodly millions of numbers of children who have been slaughtered since 1973, there's been a collective mass murder of children by the citizen populace. So I'm going to invite some people in here. And it looks like we got Black Pack in the chat. What's up, man? And we got Spoken. He says, yo, God bless, bro. Hey, what's up, man? He says, I can hopefully join after a little while. Yeah, that would be cool to have you in here. Um, so, yeah, I'm going to invite Black Pack and maybe some other people if they come by. So let me see who I got here. All right. So I just invited Black Pack, and if other brothers show up, they can come too. I'll invite Feco in here, G-Man, True Empiricism, just whoever. Let's see. But we really got to understand what abortion really is and take it seriously. If you're going to be afraid to call it what it really is, then how are you going to expect people to take you seriously in your convictions? But they want to say, well, we don't want to call women who get these murderers. We don't really. No, you can do two things at once. You can be honest and say what it is, but still provide these women the emotional help that they need to get through it. You can still show them a better way, but you don't do it by lying about being dishonest about what it is. I mean, the bottom line is if you're going to help anybody in anything that they're doing, you got to tell them the truth. You got to be real with them about what's going on. You got to be real with them about what the reality is of what they're doing. You can't sit up there and say, well, I'm not going to call it what it is because I don't want to hurt their feelings or I don't want to push them away. We don't do that in just about anything, whether it's a person with an alcohol problem, whether it's a person with an eating disorder, uh, whether it's a person who has an unhealthy addiction to just about anything. We simply look at these things for what they are. We call them what they are. And if the person really wants to be helped, then they have to accept what they've done, what they're engaging in, what they have engaged in, and uh, they can start to grow. Then they can start to heal, and then um, they can start to become a better person. But you're not going to by any stretch of the imagination really find true healing and true redemption by just being lied to. I mean, if the people who are counseling you and attempting to help you get through what you're doing, if they don't tell you what you're doing, and if they don't be flat out real about it, then they don't love you. They don't care about you. They just want to tell you what you want to hear. How are you going to truly heal from that? How are you going to truly be redeemed by um, your itching ears being scratched? You're not. So we got to be seriously have a serious conversation about what abortion really is. We got to have a serious conversation about what these people are exactly doing. We can't be afraid to shy about it and call it what it is. It's murder. And it's been millions and millions and millions of children slaughtered. And it's by the legal permission of our government. Our government has legally allowed our citizens to participate collectively in this mass murder of our unborn children. And that's just the simple reality. So I gotta take care of something real quick. I'll be right back in a second. All right, I'm back. Myron Goldman says, actually, murder is the unlawful killing of, so it's not murder by definition. Well, I touched on that. I don't know if you listened to the beginning of this hang up, but I already touched on that. Um, that's obviously an incomplete definition of murder because if that was the case, you wouldn't have definitions like mass murder. And clearly, when you look at there are texts out there that literally say that under Hitler's regime in the Holocaust that he committed mass murder of his citizens. But we also know by the historical data that it was legal. So you're going to say, well, because it was illegal for Hitler to kill all those people, it wasn't murder. So it encompasses more than just the simple fact of it uh, being unlawful. Even in unlawful contexts like those, you still have the term murder being applied to it. So it was legal for him to kill all those citizens, but they still call it mass murder anyway. So you're gonna you face palm, but I mean that's not an argument. A that's not a response to what I actually said. It's just you face palming. But if you actually got an argument to counter that, I'd love to hear it. But simply saying face palm, that means crap to me. That means literally nothing to me. But anyway, um, there are contexts of murder that says like to slaughter inhumanely or barbarously. Again, I don't know how to say that word very well. I need to look up the pronunciation of it, but uh, they don't simply say, "Oh, it's legal, therefore it's not murder." Like that's crazy. It means lust. Remember, figures of speech are beyond you. Uh, Figures of speech are beyond you. Okay, so when people talk about mass murder or killing people inhumanely, they're just speaking in a figure of speech. So like when they talk about the Jews are being mass murdered or being slaughtered inhumanely, they're just figure of speech. I mean, there's no real murder. Whatever, just figure of speech. But I mean, the important thing is you can put whatever label on it you want to. Um, I use the label murder, but you can put whatever label you want to. Um, the idea is to convey the fact that these people were unjustly killed. That's the idea. You don't have to exemplify it. I don't know what that means. I, you have to clarify that statement. Well, instead of like doing this stuff in the text chat, are you able to even come into this hangout and discuss this? You've been in my chats a few times, but I've never actually seen you in the hangout. So if you actually want to come in here and talk about this, that would be great. Built for Speed says, "Good morning. What's up, brother?" And he also says, uh, "There's a complete difference between murder and kill." That's absolutely correct. It really is. But if you're so concerned on shying away from the term murder, then I'll say they're mass killers. They're mass unjust killers. Like from a moral context, I'll just say that they're mass unjust killers. They're mass unjust slaughterers. Uh, I can just change the terminology easily and just uh, that really doesn't really debunk my argument per se. I mean, the only thing it would change is what term that I use. It would literally only change the actual term murder, but it wouldn't actually. I'm coming from not just a a legal position, but I'm coming from a moral position. But my argument is simply this: is that even when you approach it from a legal context, it still does not mean that people aren't being murdered because it's legal, because it's something has to be unlawful before it's called murder. I think that's crazy. I think that's only half of the picture. Because if it was always contextualized in the unlawful context, then you wouldn't have stuff like mass murder, where it was lawful to kill these huge numbers of people. So I don't see any legitimacy in that argument. But even if I just accept that, even if I was to say, you know what, let's say that murder only has to be applied in the legal context, that still does not go against my moral argument. That all I literally would do is just change the label. But I could say that they're viciously slaughtering people. They're viciously killing people. They're unjustly killing people from a moral standpoint. So that doesn't really affect anything. But I'll be back to talk about this some more. I'm not going to stop to hang out, but as always, I'm on this crazy library timer and it's about to boot me off. So I'm about to come back in on my phone to keep the hangout going, and I'll see you guys in a couple minutes. So while this is waiting to start back up again, while this computer is restarting back, um, I just came in on my phone so it doesn't shut the hangout down. So just give me a few seconds and we'll continue this. So I'm gonna mute. Okay, I'm back. I don't like having to do it this way, but I mean, that's just reality at the moment until I get a new laptop. So, yeah, but I want to see if anybody is actually wanting to join. Let me check out the chat here. I gotta pull up the YouTube again. Give me a second. So, Bill for Speed says has our society has loosely used terms without proper context, syntax, and grammar to convey words constructively. Yeah, the bottom line is like when generally speaking, when you control language, you can almost always control emotions too. When you frame the language in a certain way, um, you can reach people in a certain emotional way as well. And I can't just sit up here and just say that only pro-aborts are guilty of this or they do this. Pro-lifers can do this as well. I mean, it's an emotionally charged topic. I mean, you can't entirely escape from emotion in this issue. I mean, we can do the best we can, of course, to not let it cloud our thinking, to not let it um, get in the way of our objectivity. But at the same time, I mean, given how controversial this issue is, given how uh, how passionate people can get, if you're going to like entirely elude emotion, that's just not going to happen. We're human beings for crying out loud. So let's see. But again, I got to go back to what I said earlier about people talking about, oh, it's murder is unlawful. Well, wait a minute. In Sharia law, women are forced to um, have sex with their husbands whenever they want them to. But I mean, are you going to say, well, they're not raping them? I think obviously we can say that um, if you don't, if a woman doesn't consent and she's forced to do it by the letter of the law, I can say that that's rape, whether you contextualize it legally or not. It's rape, period. Or if you don't want to use the word rape, or if you want to be like a strict legalist, I guess, and you don't want to use the word rape, then fine. But it doesn't change the moral idea. I mean, the reason why these things are contextualized in these legal facets is because of the moral aspect. I mean, even if you want to throw away the terms, that don't take away the moral problems underlining those issues. So if you want to throw out rape, if you want to throw out murder, fine, you can throw out the terms all day, but that doesn't change the moral underlying facets of those things. It doesn't really matter how you want to contextualize it in that context. It doesn't matter what you want to play these sorts of legal semantics and things like this. Um, it don't change the underlining moral ideas. So you can say, uh, you can play. This is what a lot of pro boards like to do. They like to play these semantic games, and they like to uh, use words like unlawful in regards to murder. They like to use terms like fetus, uh, clump of cells. They play with language to basically hide the ball. They play with language to basically keep people chasing after their tails. They like to play with language to sort of distract you in a red herring fashion from what the core issue is. I mean, it's the same sort of thing a lot of politicians do, like when they play with language. I mean, it. I know you guys, a lot of you guys probably know the famous quote from Bill Clinton. It depends on what your definition of is. Politicians like Clinton like to do this type of crap with language all the time. You play with language. If you manipulate language on a certain level, you can manipulate people's emotions. You can manipulate how people think, how people vote, uh, things that people believe. You can influence what they believe. So we got our good friend Mishi Po, and I probably said her real name uh, on the Hangout before, but I'm not gonna say it here. So that's oh man, I love this young lady. She's just an awesome, awesome person. Very, very articulate, very, very wise, very smart, very passionate for life. Um, very, very grounded in Jesus. Just she's gonna make a heck of a wife for somebody for one of these days. Just an all around awesome person. But she says pro-choicers absolutely do not do manipulate language. Ironically, they nitpick at pro-lifers for doing. Yep. And Bill for Speed said they're plain semantics. Yep. Yep. No. Again, when you circle this issue around language, you circle it away from the core issue. You circle it away from the moral issue. That's why they use it for they use the sort of language for the unborn, and then they also use the sort of language for the general discussion, like, oh, it's bodily autonomy, oh, it's reproductive rights, oh, it's just access to healthcare and women's healthcare and so on. You know, they frame abortion as all healthcare, although they contradict themselves at the same time by saying that if women go get these abortions, it's their choice. Um, it's not like taking a cough medicine or something. Yeah, I can make a choice to take cough medicine or not if I got a bad cough. But if I take the cough medicine, then I'm actually addressing a medical issue. But when we try to draw a parallel to the abortion issue, there is no parallel. It's not like, a woman is walking into an abortion clinic to deal with a medical issue. She's doing that because she don't want this fetus in her body. She's doing this because she don't want this baby, this child of hers inside of her. She's not addressing some sort of medical issue by any stretch of the imagination. She's killing her baby. That's the bottom line. It's not like choosing or not choosing to get cough medicine when you actually have a cough. It's killing your child. That's the bottom line. So they want to say, oh, this crap is healthcare and whatnot, and then contradict themselves by saying it's just a choice for her not to be pregnant at this time. Like, she's not doing anything medical at that point. She's not addressing a medical issue by just simply not wanting to be pregnant and getting an abortion. It's again, it's playing with language. It's playing with all sorts of semantics. It's a plethora of red herring tactics to keep your eye off the moral issue. And they stack these things up with all sorts of red herrings. They stack these things up with things like, well, you just want children to come into the world, but then you don't care about the children the children once they're here. You don't care about the child once it's in the world, which is a bunch of garbage. But that's one of many tactics that they employ, one of many propaganda slogans that they use. The important thing is when talking to these people is to keep them from having you chase your tail, keep them from eluding the important issue, keep them from flooding the issue with these semantics, these red herrings, press them to justify their position on its merits. Because even if it was 100% true that pro lifers didn't care about born children, which is, again, it's a total lie, but even if it was 100% true that pro lifers didn't care about born children, that would not change the fact that abortion is wrong. That would not say, okay, pro lifers don't care about born children, therefore abortion is right. Therefore, abortion should be legally permitted. That's just ridiculous. You can't look at a similar position to debunk the previous position. What kind of analogy can I draw with that? Like, I'm trying to think of an analogy that would explain the absurdity of their thinking. Like for example, um, hmm, oh, crap, I'm getting a phone call. Give me a second. Sorry about that. I'm back. But to draw a parallel to what I was saying, that would be like saying it's bad for people to do drugs, and like it's bad to uh, drink all the time. It's bad uh, to take meth and to take I don't know, um, crack, cocaine, and this and that. It's bad to do these drugs. It's bad to take drugs while you're taking drugs. That would make you a hypocrite for taking those drugs and saying that it's bad to take those drugs and do those drugs. That would just make you a hypocrite. That doesn't mean that you're wrong, that it's bad to do drugs. That just means you're a hypocrite. That may make you hypocritical, but that don't make your stance wrong, that doing drugs is bad. So in the same way, they try to say like, oh, pro-lifers are being hypocrites by not caring about born children. But that wouldn't mean that they're incorrect about abortion. That may mean they're being inconsistent in certain facets of their position, but that don't mean that they're incorrect about what abortion is. And I think it's the same type of situation when you say, "Oh, people are doing drugs, and that's bad," and someone's advocating against doing drugs and ruining your life by doing drugs, but they're actually doing drugs themselves. Oh, and they say, "Oh, you're a hypocrite. You do drugs." So that means your argument about doing drugs is negated because you're doing drugs. Like, no, that's dumb. They can still be 100% correct about drugs and the harm it does. They can be still correct about that, but just be hypocritical that they're not being consistent with their own position. They're not practicing what they preach. That's literally all it would mean. But they could still be right that it's bad to do drugs, that it's bad to mess your life up with drugs. They can be 100% correct about that. So when they try to do this segue of, oh, pro-lifers don't care about born children, like, if that was 100% true, it would not justify abortion. It would not make it okay. So what? You need an independent argument to show that it's justified. You can't sit up here and try to impugn the position by trying to point to some hypocritical or to point to some hypocrisy. It's the same type of crap that they do when they say, "Oh, Christians are hypocrites, therefore Christianity shouldn't be taken seriously, or therefore Christianity is false," or something like that. Like, no. And there have been people who actually make that argument that they want to point to the hypocrisy of believers to try to impugn Christianity. Like, no, that ain't got nothing to do with how Christ lived and how Christ walked. That just means that um, you got believers who are hypocrites from time to time, but that's why we need Jesus, so he can cleanse us up from those hypocrisies and those double standards and things like this. He wants to clean us up of hypocrisy and to be like him, be like the one of himself who isn't a hypocrite. You can't point to an inconsistency in what someone's doing and saying that that invalidates a position that they're putting forward. That may um, show that they're not being consistent with their position, but that doesn't mean their position itself is invalidated. So you can't look for hypocrisy to argue against something. Again, it's one of many red herring tactics. They want to keep you chasing your tail. They want to keep your eye off the ball, off the important issue. They don't want you to focus on what abortion is. They don't want to say it's murder. They don't want to say it's wrong. They don't want to say it shouldn't be illegal. They don't want you to focus on those things. Instead, they want to flood the argument with these misdirections and these obstructions by bringing up things like rape, uh, bringing up things like her life's in danger, um, knowing that that has nothing to do with their core position. The vast majority of pro-abort's core position is that abortion on demand should be legal, at the very least in the early stages, like around 6 weeks or so. You got those out there who may shy away from that, like when it gets to like the viability stations and things like that. But um, I think it's pretty universal around all the pro boards. I think it's pretty universal that at least in around mm, 5 6 weeks of pregnancy, I think it's a pretty universal position that women should have the legal right to go into an abortion clinic and end that pregnancy if they choose. That's pretty much universal. Now, they may start to differ once the unborn becomes more viable and uh, those sorts of faculties develop, but it's pretty universal for just about every pro-choice or pro-abort, I should say, because they're pro-aborts and not pro-choicers. So we got Vecco. What's up, bro? And he says, "Hey, Antonio, what's up, man?" And he has a question. What's up, man? What is it? Hit me with it. Has Planned Deathhood been defunded yet? um, that's a great question. I'm gonna have to look into that a little more. Um, as far as I've been aware of, I don't think they've been defunded yet per se. But what has happened at the very least is that their sales have plummeted. If you look at even a lot of pro-choice websites, even a lot of pro-choice websites that like reports on these like Gut Monger and Planned Parenthood, those entities have talked about, and even like stuff like the CDC statistics, abortions have dropped and dropped and dropped, and since like the 1990s, and that obviously has had a huge impact on Planned Parenthood incomes. So, at the very least, if they haven't been defunded, they have taken a huge, huge beating in their income when it comes to abortion. Because the fact is, the pro-life position is advancing. The message of life is getting out there, and it's getting stronger all the time. And they're taking an absolute beating right now. I think it's like, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's a fairly large percentage of the Planned Parenthood clinics that existed 10 years ago. Most of them aren't even here. Most of them have been shut down, and that's in no short part due to people getting more information, people finding out the science of development of the unborn, um, uh, and really, I think it's about the fact that more people are starting to see what these people are and see who these people are and what they really believe. You've seen like countless videos of people attacking pro-lifers and property being destroyed, and I even seen this coward girl, this coward adult, like freaking like slug this girl in the face. It's and those aren't isolated incidents at all. Those You don't see tons of incidents of pro-lifers attacking pro-abortion. You just don't see it. But you can see like countless instances on the other side. So he asked another question: has Planned Parenthood always been funded by the government? As far as I can tell, I believe so. Um, they get they've gotten government grants for many years. I don't know. I don't have the facts to back up if they always been funded, but they've been funded by the government for a very long time. So I think that's a great question. I have to look into that, like, um, to see whatever their legal standing has been with the government. But they have been funded by a long for a long time. I know that, but have it's always been that way? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I would uh, maybe I will have to look at the laws. Like, let me see when Planned Parenthood was founded. So, see, Planned Parenthood founded in October 16th, 1916, in Brooklyn City, New York. So that's when Planned Parenthood was founded. I would imagine since abortion was illegal until 1973 in the United States, that uh, yeah, I'm just speculating here, but it's probably more than likely they weren't funded at the time or funded by the government. I mean, if abortion is illegal, it would stand to reason that the government can't fund something like that. So uh, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I'm gonna look into that. And Bill for Speech says yes, Vico, Bill Clinton and Obama funded Planned Deathhood. But it's interesting that these people are like scared to death about just abortion as a whole, just plummeting and um, gaining more and more opposition in our culture. As cultures like Ireland have changed their laws and they basically didn't learn crap from us, we're moving forward and we're continuing the fight against this abortion culture. I mean, they were just crying to death about the potential overturning of Roe v. Wade with the Justice Kennedy retiring, and Trump is more than likely probably going to put, well, he's more than likely going to put a conservative on the Supreme Court. And I want to talk about that a little bit. When you put any person on the Supreme Court, it shouldn't be so much whether they're conservative or liberal. When you put anyone on the Supreme Court, it should be them interpreting the laws as they're written on the books. They look at the Constitution as it was originally interpreted by the founding fathers, and they look at the laws as the founding fathers originally interpreted them on the books. It's not about what I like or about what you like or anything like that. It's about what is the originalist interpretation of these laws as they were written on the books at the time they were written. That's what the Supreme Court is for. It's to interpret the Constitution, is to interpret the founding uh, uh, the founding policies that were written into our government at its inception. It's not uh, about putting policies into place that I like or you like. It's not about putting conservative or liberal policies into place. That was not at all what the Supreme Court was originally intended to do. And these liberals have gotten to the point to where they think it's about this sort of arm to rubber stamp what they believe. It's ridiculous that they think it's about whether they control the Supreme Court, about what conservatives control the Supreme Court. It's a stupid argument because they're framing this as it's supposed to be their entity and nobody else's to pass the stuff that they believe. And that's not the function of the Supreme Court whatsoever. That's why they're in a frenzy right now to even expand the number of justices. They want to expand the number of justices because what they want is to remain in power, and they want to remain in power permanently. That's what they really want. So they want to expand the amount of justices to 11 so they can potentially um, outnumber the ones who tend to be conservative leaning. But again, it's not about whether you lean conservative or liberal. It's about looking at the laws as they are on the books. And Justice Kennedy, he was sort of that swing vote, if you will. He sometimes seemed to vote things that seemed to lean conservative, and at times he seemed to vote for things that leaned liberal. He was basically the X factor, if you will. So these people are in a frenzy of what's going on with this Supreme Court issue, and they're going to do the same thing, if not even worse. I mean, we got to look back to I think it was around the late '80s, early '90s. Uh, they absolutely tried to torch Clarence Thomas's nomination for the Supreme Court. They tried to railroad that man, and it was literally a circus. I think he framed it himself as it was a circus. It was just unbelievable what they tried to do to this man because he's an independent black man. He's an independent thinking black man. He doesn't operate on the liberal plantation, and they they couldn't stand him being on the Supreme Court. They didn't want him to even have a seat. They just made all these vicious accusations about this man, and but thankfully, um, with all their tactics and the massive circus they created, he still got confirmed. Um, but they did something similar. I don't even think it was just similar. I think they did even worse to former Supreme Court nominee Robert Bork, because Robert Bork was an originalist. He he had conservative views, but he was down to the books, a constitutionalist, down to the books, a constitutional originalist. And he had views that were conservative leaning, that were anti Roe v. Wade, and they railroaded this man. There's a term called borking, basically. It was derived from Robert Bork, and just the insane madness they did to keep this man from becoming confirmed into the Supreme Court spot. They absolutely railroaded this man. I mean, they just like they did to Clarence Thomas, they did equal, if not even worse, to him. And unfortunately, they were able to succeed. But mind you, again, this was back in the late 80s slash early 90s. They did this. Imagine how vicious they're going to get today with any Supreme Court nominee that Trump picks. Imagine just how bad they're today. I don't know if you guys have seen, it's been spread massively all over the internet about this dude who was in a Whataburger, who his 30-year-old guy, who he assaulted this 16-year-old boy that was wearing a MAGA hat, a Make America Great Again hat. He's just sitting there minding his own business, just having a burger with his friend. And he was just saying, well, I support the president. And then the dude throws a drink on him and said, you ain't supporting S N-word. And then he takes his hat and then he walks off and tells him it's going to look great in his effing fireplace. And then he calls him a B word. These people are getting unhinged. These people are getting out of control. This very tribalistic attitude is just advancing to just levels that are just unprecedented. I mean, you even got people like Maxine Waters talking about you gotta harass these people in public, and these people don't even have a right to live peacefully. I mean, you had this other lady, I can't remember her name, but this other lady who was talking about what's her face? I think she was referring to Trump's press secretary. What is her name? Why can't I think of it? I don't know why her name escapes me, but she was talking about how she has like she and everybody else who are basically in the Trump administration or agree with Trump's policies and how he's governing. She's basically saying these people have no right to live peacefully, and it's like a life sentence. She even said, like it was just crazy, just the vileness, just the vile nature of these people, just the unhinged nature of these people. These people are getting out of control. These people are coming more and more unhinged by the day, by the week. And if you've seen the massive fight on the Supreme Court, if you've seen the massive fight on the Supreme Court of Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas back in the late 80s, early 90s, if you see what they did back then was bad, and it was bad even for those standards, even for those times, you ain't seen nothing yet. If they were that vile back then, you can imagine how vile and how sick they're going to be to keep to attempt to block the Supreme Court nominee that Trump picks. You can imagine how vile they're going to be right now. So we thought, they was in for a fight back then, but we haven't seen anything yet. These people are getting worse and worse by the day. I mean, these people, but they're not really showing us anything we didn't know before. The difference is they're just showing us who they really are. They're just showing us what they've always been. These people aren't tolerant. These people aren't inclusive. These people aren't, they don't really want to have, I mean, maybe at one time they held those ideals, but the party is drifting further and further and further to the left. It ain't even about whatever platform they want to run on. It's about, well, we hate Trump, we dislike Trump. That's it. Like that's seriously what they want to run on. That's seriously what they want to campaign on. No, nobody's going to take that seriously. But like I said, like if you think what they did years ago to these Supreme Court nominees that disagreed with their paradigm, that disagreed with their worldview, if you think that was bad back then, you can imagine how unhinged they are now. So whatever Supreme Court nominee, I think it's going to be in a couple of days. I think it's going to be on like July 9th. So it's July 7th today. So I believe they were saying that by July 9th, like they were saying this like a week back or something, like by July 9th, uh, Trump is going to have his nominee, I think. So we could project it a couple of days from now, uh, when Trump picks his Supreme Court nominee, when he's expected to pick his Supreme Court nominee, that the fireworks are going to start. It's it's I don't even want to know what's going to happen. But whatever happens, it's these people are going to get vile. They're going to get vicious. They're going to get dirty. They do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned at all. They don't want to see any. I mean, even if it undermines it, even in the slightest, they don't want to see that happen. But here's the problem: it's not that overturn Roe v. Wade is going to make abortion illegal in all 50 states. That's not what it's going to do. All it's going to do is shift the issue back to the states. And I don't think that's what they don't want that at all, because before uh, gay marriage was legalized under Obama's presidency, it was a states issue, basically. It was a state by state thing. And all overturn Roe v. Wade would do was push it right back to the states. Now, mind you, I want to see that overturned in a heartbeat, because even people like even liberal leaning Supreme Court uh, justices like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as liberal leaning as she is, as pro abortion as she is, even she said that Roe v. Wade basically had no legitimate legal standing. Like it was wrongly decided. It really had no legit legal context. Um, it was probably one of the most massive flops of a Supreme Court decision in history. So you even had um, there was even like people who support abortion in our laws, who are saying like, okay, this issue was not legitimately decided. There was no legit case to this. There was no legit context to uh, put abortion on demand in all 50 states there. But nonetheless, the fact that it was decided unconstitutionally and decided wrongly, and not and it didn't align with the Constitution by any stretch of the mind, despite all that, they don't want to see that overturned. They don't want to see any threat to that, even if it's if a leak happens, that's too much for them. No, but they're not looking at that the bottle is just going to leak. They're looking at it as it's going to explode, and um, the container is just going to be destroyed, and that's just going to be the end of abortion as we know it. But they are so bent on not even letting the least bit of a serious challenge to Roe v. Wade even exist. They don't want to even see that surface at all. So when we see whatever Trump's Supreme Court nominee is going to be, and Trump has said that, I think he said he might not ask them about Roe v. Wade or something like that. Um, but whoever he picks, I think, in my personal opinion, I mean, just my honest personal opinion, they may very well, very likely be pro-life, but I do believe he's going to pick a justice who's going to look at how things are on the books, interpret the laws as they were originally intended and written. And the people who tend to look at things as they were actually originally intended and written in the Constitution, more often than not, those people tend to be pro-life leaning. But again, it's not about whether you lean pro-life or whether you lean pro-abortion. It's not about what you like or don't like. That's not the function of the Supreme Court. It's not about rubber stamping your personal views. It's about looking at the laws as they are on the books and interpreting them as the founding fathers originally intended them to be. They wanted to basically frame this context that's nowhere found in the Constitution. Oh, there's a right to privacy in the 14th Amendment. They basically tried to pull like these standards out their backsides, like the 14th Amendment, I think it's like the Establishment Clause in the 14th Amendment or something like that. They were trying to say supports the right to an abortion, but um, I very, very much highly doubt that if um, the founding fathers were alive today to see how they interpreted that they would even remotely have thought that that was they would be appalled. They would be um, they would be just stunned, and they would just be ashamed. They would probably think that we should be ashamed of ourselves, how we've interpreted, or not how we, but how the court at the time tried to conflate that into the law. There was no context of abortion in the right, this right to privacy. There was nothing like that over there. It didn't exist. But they tried to conflate that as an interpretation to get to get abortion on demand passed in all 50 states. And even, like I said, even liberal leaning, legal, educated persons like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, even liberal leaning people like those who got extensive legal backgrounds, who've got credible legal backgrounds to give legal credible opinions. Even people like her was talking about how that was irrationally decided. But I mean, nonetheless, the fact that it was irrationally decided didn't change the fact that it became law. I mean, it's similar to how Plessy versus Ferguson was law, but we can see how wrong that was too. Just because something gets established as law doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean it should be law. So they are going to probably pull out stops that they've never pulled out before. But I mean, in a way, I want to say it's horrible that this is what we've gotten to. But at the same time, I want to say that it may be actually good for conservatives. It may be good for those who are on the side of life because it's going to give us a chance to see who these people are. And when people see who these people are, even some of the people who have been on their side have been like, "Oh, okay, these people are crazy." Like you have people who were once proud to call themselves liberals, or those on the left who have like shifted more to the center and even to the right entirely. Like You look at people like Dave Rubin, who's been a classical liberal for many, many years, but his stances on a lot of things have shifted to sort of like the liberal center, if you will, because he's seen the just the foul nature of a lot of people on the left. And when you really see what these people believe, you got people who identify themselves as liberals who want to say, I don't want anything to do with this. You got people who have identified themselves as liberals who say, like, these people are insane. And I thought, uh, I thought it was Trump was the problem. I thought he was the one who was the Nazi. I thought he was the one who wanted to do and be involved in this racism and this anti-inclusivity and all this other stuff. I thought Trump was the one about all that stuff, but it seems like they are the ones who are the most intolerant ones. They're the most bigoted ones, and these people are showing themselves for who they really are. And when we see this SCOTUS nominee, when we see this process unfold, I think even more so, these people are going to expose how twisted and unhinged they really are. And in a way, and again, you don't want to see things happen this way. You don't want to see things divulge and devolve to this level of depravity, to where people can't even have legitimate conversations, and it's just constantly contextualizing a tribalistic framework, and people don't want to talk to each other anymore. People don't want to share ideas anymore. People don't want to persuade people by engaging in the arena of ideas and conversations, rationality, logic. No, it's about, we're going to make you into a bad person if you disagree with us. That's what it's become on the left. I think Ben Shapiro makes a great distinction between liberals and leftists. I mean, leftists can be liberals, but that doesn't mean all liberals are per se leftists. Basically, he says that those who are leftists are the extreme unhinged, basically the unhinged crazies, the unhinged maniacs, the unhinged morons, like those Antifa idiots. But then you got the liberals or classical liberals, like I just mentioned Dave Rubin, people like him who have classically identified as a liberal, people like Sargon of Akkad, who have identified himself as a classical liberal, but they've gotten to the point to where they can't stand these fringe leftists, and they've basically undermined a lot of classical liberal ideals, and they've taken their party, they've taken their side of the political spectrum and shifted it to a position of intolerance, of authoritarianism. They've shifted it into this vile position that they once thought that conservatives were guilty of, that they once thought that the right was guilty of. So you don't want to see things happen this way, to where people are being um, railroaded, people are being shunned, people are being shamed, and this and that. Like what they tried to do, what they did to Robert Bork, and what they tried to do to Clarence Thomas. But at the same time, it's going to show people who they really are. And they've gotten so unhinged that they don't even have a platform. They've gotten so unhinged that they don't even have any real ideas. It's about, you hate Trump and you hate everybody who disagrees with Trump. I mean, you even had this dude, I think he was on CNN or some other liberal media network, saying that if you agree with Trump, you are the bad guy. That's literally what he said, more or less, that if you agree with Trump, you are the bad guy. And this is the rhetoric that these people have divulged to. Um, this is the rhetoric, this inflammatory rhetoric. This is where it's gone to. And this is the reason why Trump was created. Trump was created as an answer to that crap because, um, as Ben Shapiro pointed out, Trump basically just flips the middle finger to these people and says, "Screw you, folks." That's basically what Trump does. He just flips the middle finger to them, and a lot of people gravitate to that. A lot of people agree with him because they're tired of these fringe leftists. They're tired of these intolerant people, calling them bigots when they have no evidence to back that up. They're getting tired of them, uh, um, being physically abusive, and they're getting tired of them protecting, uh, being hypocritical and protecting people when they say vile things. When one side says vile things, like their side, they protect them, but when the other side says vile things, uh, they want to call for their careers and their TV shows. Like for example, like and Roseanne, she's not even a liberal, like a conservative. She's never been conservative. And that's one thing like these liberals like to do. They like to conflate the fact that a liberal supports Trump, therefore they're not liberal. That's which is asinine, which is retarded. But they were basically saying that she supports Trump, therefore she's a conservative, therefore she's right leaning. And no, that's just stupid. But she made her comments, her remarks that may or may not have been racially charged or whatever, and she lost her TV show. But then on the other side of that, um, you had Amy Schumer who called Ivanka Trump that vile word that I'm not gonna say, but she called her that vile word, and she keeps her show. Roseanne loses her show by making these what could have been anti-Islamic remarks, what could have been these racist remarks towards Islamic people. She loses her show. But when Amy Schumer calls the president's daughter some vile name that's outright just despicable, and these are the people that want to talk about how much they support women and how much they're pro women, and then you call them a disgusting name like that denigrates women. But when Amy Schumer does it, that's she shouldn't have said that, but she apologized, so it's okay. She gets to keep her show, and not only did she get to keep her show, she also got an award. So it's sickening, it's despicable, it's shameful, the double standards of these people. But that's that's just how these people are. This is what these people are. But I've gotten to the point to where I pretty much said what I want to say. I didn't intend to go into all these areas, but most of the time conversations evolve, and that's just what happens. But to conclude this hangout, abortion is mass murder by the citizen populace. Uh, we've had massive amounts of murders since the founding of abortion and Roe v. Wade, the legalization of all abortion in all 50 states. And it's, I can't put into words how sad and sick it is. But um, we got to be honest about what it is. We got to be honest about what it's done to our country. We got to be honest about what it's done to our society. And most importantly, pro-lifers need to be honest about calling it out for what it actually is, the nature of what it is. It's murder. Or again, like I said earlier, even if you don't want to use the term murder. If you want to be the strict legalist and play these semantics, even if you don't want to use the term murder, so what? That doesn't. That's a moot point at best. It doesn't mean that the nature of the act itself isn't vile. It doesn't mean it isn't immoral. It just means that you want to play semantics and be a strict legalist. But even being a strict legalist, you still don't get away from the fact that it's murder because, as we saw, mass murder has been applied to even in lawful contexts. It was clearly legal for Stalin, Pol Pot, Hitler, and so on to kill their people. It was legal, but it's still termed in frames, it's still contextualized in frames of mass murder. So murder is a legal term, but it don't just get applied to um, when things are unlawful. Even when killing is lawful, that term murder is still often applied. And when we segue to it to not not the government sanctioning it and killing their people in mass numbers, but the citizen populace over many years killing their children. The citizens have been given these legal powers by the government to kill their children. And that's why I call it mass murder by the citizen populace, because that's what it's become. Um, Millions and millions of children have been slaughtered. And we need to point out for what it is. There seems to be some interaction in the comments about Margaret Sanger. CRISPR says, my position is that Sanger wasn't a racist. Your position is that she was a racist, as demonstrated by an out of context quote to W.E. Du Bois, who didn't find it terribly racist at that time. Well, the quote is uh, she wanted to have the members of black society keep them under control. It said we don't want to get the word out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, so we're going to have ministers hired to basically keep them in check. That's essentially what she was saying, is that we're going to have ministers. Um, we're going to have ministers in the black community keep them in check, so that they don't get the idea that they want blacks exterminated off the planet. That was the context of her quote. And Les Bill for Speed Riley points out is that she did speak at a Klan rally. She literally spoke at a Klan rally. This is indisputable history. But she's not a racist. But the historical documents support that she spoke at a Ku Klux Klan rally. And I'll put links in the description to support that, just so people can see that. But um, I gotta go. I gotta end this hangout. But yeah, abortions, mass murder by the citizen populace, and pro-lifers. Don't be afraid to call it what it is. But also remember to do it in love. Remember to um, because I mean, especially if you're a believer, just know that we are all murderers under God standards, because we've all hated our brothers and sisters in our heart. And if you've even hated your brother and sister in your own heart, then you are a murderer in your heart, and we've all been guilty of that. So we are all murderers according to God's standards. But being honest about what abortion is don't give you a license to abuse these women, and don't give you a license to say terrible things about these women. It just means you tell them the truth about what they support and what they've done, but you show them love and you show them support. You show them that they can be redeemed from it and that there's healing available. So With that said, I'm going to end this hangout. Thanks you guys for watching. Please rate, share, and subscribe. And as the amazing Lucas puts it, and all that fun stuff. See you guys later. God bless. Take care. Peace.